fam. Welcome to Matters of the Heart Unleashed. I pray that you are thriving in life and that you are living God's best life for you. Today's chat, we are going to talk about how all relationships are not created equal. We're going to dive into evaluating relationships to determine how much access you should give a person, or maybe how much access a person should never have in your life. So today we are going to jump right into this topic. All relationships are not created equal. So I want to start off by saying, I want you to think about this. Just think about your life. Sometimes we put people in places in our lives based on our expectations, not based on what they're showing us, but based on what we feel that they should bring to the table or should be in our lives. So we build a relationship with a person, and from what we see, we kind of, and prematurely, we can form expectations of a person because of what maybe we've seen in a shorter period of time. So with that being said, when we do that, we can set ourselves up for disappointment. And the reason being is that when we set expectations on an individual who really does not have the capability of meeting those expectations, when it comes to interacting with you, you look at them and you say, well, they're not doing what I think they're supposed to do. They're not following what they're supposed to do. This is who they are. This is what they're supposed to do. Well, sometimes we make those expectations of the person without evaluating and vetting the person in that particular role. So we're going to talk about that today. How do you identify your circles? Who belongs in what circle? And I identify, and this is the term I use. We have three circles. We have our inner circle, which is our closest to us. Then we have our middle circle, and then we have our outer circle. So we will dive into more of these circles during this chat. So go ahead and just pull up your chair, take some time, and just listen to what is being shared to you today in this video, because I really do believe that it will help you when it comes to even avoiding things that you probably don't even have to go through. So let's jump right in. So we all desire relationships. That's just a part of who we are. We all desire relationships. And some people may say, well, I don't need anybody. I can be by myself. I'm good. That's not the case. Everybody, every human being has a desire to be in connection with someone else. And I think what it is, a lot of times we tell ourselves that because of hurt and pain that we've experienced. So our defense mode can be convincing ourselves that we don't need anybody. We're good by ourselves. But in reality, we all need relationships. So our makeup is not designed for isolation. That's not the way we're designed. And if you go back to Genesis, where God said that it was not good for man to be alone. That's what God said. It wasn't good for Adam to be alone. He needed someone else there with him to complete him. So God made the birds. He made animals. But even though he made the animals, it wasn't the perfect fit. It didn't give Adam what he needed. So what did God do? He created Eve. And when God created Eve, that was exactly what Adam needed. That, my friend, that's relationship. So we're all of us have that within us. All of us have that desire for a relationship. So, and even with God creating Eve, there was a purpose behind that relationship. So he created Eve because he knew Adam needed something. He needed something to complete him. But in completing Eve, it wasn't just a random, I'm completing her, but it was, I'm completing her for a purpose. And when you look at it, that purpose was to birth a nation. So not only did Adam need relationship to feel complete, but behind the relationship, there was purpose. I want you to remember that. Even in your relationships, behind your relationships, there should be purpose behind your relationships. So as we chat about relationships, I would like for you to think about your different relationships and think about how they're impacting your life. Are they good relationships? Are they impacting your life in a positive way? Or are they impacting your life negatively? And also think about the purpose. What purpose do these relationships have in my life? And, sometimes once you do that evaluation and you see where things stand, you may have to reassign people into another circle because maybe at that season, they are not in a particular category. And we're going to talk about seasons in a different chat. But that also comes along with identifying relationships. You have to know maybe when it's time to let go or when it's time to move someone in a different circle. So I want to start today with the one word that the world seems to have no clue of. The word friend. Friend is defined as a person who has strong liking for and trust in another person. Friend, a person who has strong liking for and trust in another person. A friend is a person who is not an enemy. Not an enemy. A friend is a person who helps or supports. So friend, strong liking, trust, supports, and not an enemy. That's the definition of what a friend is. So knowing the definition of a friend, I think it's accurate to say that all relationships that you value, all of your relationships that you value, should contain the components of a friend. Whether it's a parent-child relationship, a husband-wife relationship, a family, or individuals outside of your family, these relationships should exhibit friendship. If they are not giving friendship vibes, what I suggest, talk to God and ask him to give you the weapon of goodbye. Well, Monika, what is the weapon of goodbye? So I like to think of it like this. In the Bible, it tells us to put on our full armor of God, our helmet of salvation, our breastplate. The Bible lists all of these different armor that we're supposed to wear as Christians. So for you, and this is just me, I'm adding one more to that list, and that's the weapon of goodbye. And I'm not just talking of, when I say the weapon of goodbye, I'm not just talking about sporadic times that you may have a disagreement or an argument with a friend, with someone you have a relationship with. That's what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about that. But what I'm referring to is when you're consistently not feeling supported, or when you feel like you're always the one giving and they're always taking. If you find that there's a consistent pattern of you receiving the short end of the stick, it's time to use that weapon of goodbye. Goodbye. Now, I was recently watching a reality TV show, and I do watch some reality TV shows because I like to look at the fashion. That's what I do. But as I was watching them, let me first say this. We know that most of these reality TV shows are scripted. But what I've noticed, and you have probably noticed the same thing, when it comes to people identifying themselves as friends in these reality TV shows, the relationships are so fake and phony. They are fake and phony. And they claim to support each other. They, attend each other's functions. They go on trips. They do, events together. But the moment someone has the opportunity to throw shade or spill tea on someone, isn't it funny how immediately they do it? Immediately. But this is your friend. But you're ready to spill tea and throw shade on them. And the thing that really interesting to me is how even you've seen those situations, and you may have even experienced, or you may have done this, where someone is talking about a friend of yours just in conversation, and you say something or someone says something low key that's throwing shade, or you're saying something that you really have no business saying, but you're like, well, I was just saying it just because I didn't mean anything by it. When you open your mouth and you say something about a person, that's your friend. Regardless of the intent, you're wrong. And I've noticed that's how a lot of these reality TV shows are when it comes to their relationships or friendships. And sadly, now this is my belief, things we see on these scripted reality TV shows have become the way the world approaches relationships and friendships. And there's no true understanding of what a friend really is. Not an enemy, supports, strong liking. That is not what we see in these scripted reality TV shows. Even though they say friends or we're girls or whatever, that's not the case. That is not the definition of a friend. So Proverbs 18:24 tells us that a man who has friends must show himself friendly. So if a person does not know how to be friendly, how is it that they can have friends? Go back to Proverbs 18:24. If you can't show yourself friendly, how can you have friends? How can you be something that you have no clue of what it is? You can't. It could be safe to say that the person who does not know how to be friendly, I would say, has acquaintances, but not friends. In order to have friends, again, you must show yourself friendly. So in order for you to have a friend, or anyone to have a friend, they must first be a friend. They must understand what it means to be a friend. We can be so quick to meet someone and put them in the friend category. And I've experienced times where, you can meet someone and you instantly click with that person. And, you start hanging out, you're talking on the phone, and you're really vibing with that person. And before you know, you're like, oh yeah, that's my friend. But the thing is, sometimes we can prematurely label a person as a friend. We need to, everyone, when they come into your life in relationships, my suggestion, everyone begins at acquaintance stage. You have to remain at the acquaintance stage until that trust builds, until you are able to evaluate the person to see if they could move to that friend stage. Because remember what we said what a friend is? A friend is someone who supports you, who's not an enemy, who has a strong liking for you. That's what a friend is. So I read an article about it was an article written by a group of doctors, and they were discussing the human behavior and relationships. And I found it interesting that, and this is something that I did not know, it takes an average of 2 years to clearly know a person. 2 years to really have an understanding of who this person is. Now, we know even 2 years may not be long enough, because I'm sure you've been in relationships where it may have been 5 years and you're like, well, I didn't know they were like that. Even in marriage, there are things you may find out about your spouse that you had no idea of. But these doctors were saying that, ideally it takes 2 years to really get a clear gist of a person's makeup. And they also stated that it takes at least 3 months, for a friendship to form. So think about this. At least 3 months for a friendship to form, and 2 years to have a clear picture of who they are. So between month 3 and year 2, you're in that process of learning a person. So that's a stretch from 3 months to 2 years. It's taken you all of that time to clearly understand. I didn't just to know that, but to clearly understand how that person operates. And knowing this, we have to ask ourselves, honestly, are we labeling friendships too quick? If it's at least 3 months to form a friendship, when you meet a person in the first month, you've hopped in and said, oh, that's my friend. Have you labeled them too quickly? I'm not saying that it can't get there, but we probably need to keep them in the acquaintance zone until at least we really know who they are. And when we start labeling friendships too soon, when we label relationships too soon, it can create a negative impact in your life, because when you start labeling a person as a friend. So remember what we said what a friend is. It's someone who supports you, who has a strong liking for you, someone who is not an enemy, who's not adversarial to you, someone who you trust. That's what we said a friend is. So I want you to think about it. When we label friends too quickly, in a month's time, in 2 months' time, can you really say that you trust a person? Can you really say there's a strong liking? There may be a liking, but can you say there's a strong liking? Do you know enough about them where you can say, oh yeah, they'll support me in anything after 1 or 2 months? Even after 3 months, you're still learning, but at least in 3 months, you've had enough time to evaluate, to kind of see where things are. So, the thing is, we have to learn to not mislabel or label too quickly. And when we do that, we could be placing someone in our lives that's not even supposed to be there, supposed to even be in your life, or 2, not supposed to have that much access to your life. So it's very important not to quickly label a person as a friend. And it's not being mean, but it's protecting your heart. It's protecting you. Not saying you can't be an acquaintance. You can still go out with the person, have fun, laugh, do whatever. But friendship is only designed for those who support you, who have strong likings for you, who you trust. That's what friends are. So the Bible tells us to guard our hearts. And when we place people in our lives too soon, without knowing their purpose, without evaluating, or without first, and most importantly, consulting God about the relationship, we leave our hearts unprotected and susceptible to turmoil, drama, and disappointment that could have been avoided if we had only taken the time to evaluate the relationship and not be so quick to put that friend label on an individual. So say you're at home and the doorbell rings. What is the first thing you do? Now, I know we have all this technology ring so you can see who's at the doorbell. But I mean, before we even had ring, what do you do when someone would come and ring your doorbell or knock at your door? What is the first thing you would do? You would probably run to a window and evaluate the scene outside. You're discreetly looking through the blinds or a peephole to see who it is before you even open your mouth and say anything. So then if you feel comfortable enough, you say, who is it? And you may even have a little bass in your voice because you're in protection mode now. You see somebody knocking at your door. You're not sure of who they is. You're just seeing them for the first time. So you may have a little bass in your voice. Who is it? So if it's someone you don't know, you proceed with what? More questions. You don't just open the door and let them in. You keep asking questions. What do you want? You are grilling them because you are not just going to open the door and let a stranger in your home. No matter how nice they look, no matter how nice they sound, you're not just going to open the door to just any random person. See where we're going with this. The same way we respond to a stranger knocking at our door is the same way we should respond when it comes to relationships. Your heart is the door. I want you to remember this analogy I just gave you with the stranger at the door. When it comes to you, when you meet a person, remember this analogy with the person knocking at the door. So your heart is the door. And you are responsible for protecting and guarding your heart from people who could potentially bring harm into your life. Just because someone is knocking, that does not mean you have to let them in. Remember that. Just because you meet a person and they're nice and they're kind, that doesn't mean you have to let them in. You can still be cordial, you can still have conversation, but that does not mean you have to let them in. And I want to say before we continue, even when we're talking about this is not a chat that is trying to make you fearful of relationships or distant from people or just cautious of everybody you meet. This is not what the chat is about. It's about understanding that you have to guard your heart. And when I say guard, I mean guard it with a fence. Don't guard it with Fort Knox. Guard it with the fence. You be the one to determine, am I going to open that gate for the person to come into my life? So when it comes to relationships, we have to start vetting people just as we do when someone knocks on our door. We have identified your heart as the door. So when you hear a knock, you meeting a new person, that's that knock. As soon as you meet a new person and you like, okay, maybe this is going somewhere, that's that knock at the door. Start evaluating right then and ask questions to determine the purpose of the relationship. And do not forget to include God in the process. That is number one. Include God in the process. Ask him, okay, God, I met this person. Why are they in my life? Are they in my life because you brought them? Or are they in my life because the enemy is trying to do something and distract me and mess up my life? Show me, God, why are they here? So first of all, if and God will reveal to you, and things will happen where you see it's not from God. And when he shows you that, that's when you use that weapon of goodbye. Goodbye. But if it's someone that you know is sent by God, that's when we start evaluating. Okay, God, show me, what is the purpose? Why are they in my life? Why did you allow them to come into my life? So we include God in the process because the thing is, even when we evaluate, we ask questions, we observe an individual, we still cannot know what's deep inside their hearts. No matter how many questions we ask, no matter how much time we spend with a person, we will never know the deepest and innermost parts of a person's heart. But God does. And that's why we include him in the process, because he sees things in their hearts that we can't even see. But I will tell you this. The things that we can't see, God will reveal them to you when you keep him in the process. So as you're evaluating and asking questions, you should be asking yourself, we're talking about these circles. Remember I mentioned earlier, we have circles. So you should be asking yourself as you're evaluating, as you're, spending time with this person, as you're seeking God, the questions should be, is this person an inner circle person? Is this person a middle circle person? Is this person an outer circle person? Or should this person not even be in my life at all? So let's start. We're going to jump in and kind of give a little more attention to the different circles. So let's start with your inner circle. Your inner circle are those individuals that always have your back. They're always there for you. You trust them, they trust you. You have their back and they have your back. They always support you in everything and you always support them in everything, no matter what. There's always support. These are the ones that you can reach out to no matter how good or bad a situation is, knowing they will rejoice in the good and hold you up and encourage you in the bad. The ones you never have to be concerned with throwing shade or spilling tea about you because they genuinely love and care about you. Remember the friendship definition? Strong liking, trust, not an enemy, supports. This is your inner circle. And I'm going to give you an example from the Bible, Naomi and Ruth. And I'm giving these examples because I want you to actually have a feel of what an inner circle relationship looks like. So I'm giving you an example from the Bible, Naomi and Ruth. So most of the times you hear about Naomi and Ruth, it's about, it's in the context of Ruth and Boaz. It's in the context of marriage. But in this instance, we're going to focus solely on the relationship between Naomi and Ruth. So Naomi had a husband whose name was Elimelech and two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. So Naomi's husband dies and she's left with only her two sons. Naomi's sons get married and they get married to Orpah and Ruth. The sons die. Now the dad had already died. Naomi's husband died. Then Naomi's two sons die too. And that leaves Naomi with her two daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth. So after everyone, her husband and her sons die, Naomi decides to leave the town they're living in, which is the town of Moab, And she decides to return back home. She wants to go back home. I'm going back to my hometown. My husband has died. My 2 kids have died. And I'm going back home. So as she goes back, as she starts on that trip back home, Orpah and Ruth, they start on the trip with her. So as they're traveling, Naomi stops and tells both of them, go back home. Go back with your relatives. Don't follow me back to my hometown. You have a family here in Moab. You stay here with your family. I'll be fine. You just keep on and go back to your family. You need to be with your family. So Orpah, one of the daughter-in-laws, she kisses Naomi and she turns back around and she heads back home to her family. Ruth, on the other hand, no matter what Naomi said, go back home with your family. Go. I'm good. I'm going back home. You go back home with your family. That's where you need to be. No matter what Naomi said, Ruth would not leave her. So this is my belief. Ruth put herself in Naomi's shoes. That's why she didn't leave. She put herself in Naomi's shoes. Naomi lost her husband and she lost 2 of her sons. That was her whole family. Naomi had lost her family. And she was alone. So Ruth knew she had family to go back to in Moab whenever she wanted to. But Ruth had no one to go to. She was going back to her hometown. But what was she going back to? Her husband was dead and her 2 sons were dead. Ruth decided she was not going back to Moab. She would be there right by Naomi's side in this difficult season. And that is what Ruth did. Interestingly, and this is kind of a side note, her decision to be a true friend to Naomi resulted in her meeting her husband Boaz. Had Ruth not went along with Naomi, had Ruth not been a true friend and committed to staying by Naomi's side in this difficult season of her life, Ruth never would have met Boaz. So Ruth is an example of how you want your inner circle to look like. In bad times, they're there and they got your back. In good times, they're there and they're celebrating with you. It doesn't matter what you say when they see that you're in a difficult situation, when they see you're in turmoil, when they see you're going through things, they're still going to be there. They are going to refuse to leave you in that place of turmoil, of disappointment. They've got you. That's your inner circle. So let's move to the middle circle. Now, your middle circle are those individuals who have your back and support you when they can. These are individuals who do care, like Orpah, but do not have the same ride or die compassion like Ruth. This does not discredit individuals in this category, and it's not saying that you don't love them and you don't care about them, but you know your limitations. You know the expectations with individuals in your middle circle. You cannot set expectations of those in your inner circle to a person who is in your middle circle, because if you do, once again, setting wrong expectations lead to disappointment. You love them, you love your middle circle, but you just can't share everything with them. They're boundaries. One example, middle circle, Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane. So I want you to think about this. Jesus and the 12 disciples. This is from the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 26. And Jesus and his 12 disciples are partaking in Passover, and it's which some refer to as the Last Supper. So Jesus and his 12, his crew, they are partaking in Passover, the Last Supper. After Passover, Jesus and the 12 go to a place called the Mount of Olives, and then they go to Gethsemane. So I want you to picture this. Jesus is in Gethsemane with all 12 of his disciples. So they just had a meal. They just had broke bread. They started traveling, went through one town. Now here they are in the Garden of Gethsemane. They're in Gethsemane. So Jesus looks at them. He looks at all 12 and he says, "Stay here while I go over there and pray." Stay here. I want you to remember, stay here. Boundaries. But when he takes 3 along, but then he tells all 12 to stay here, but then he takes 3 of the disciples along with him as he goes further to proceed in the garden to pray. So he tells the 12 to stay, but then he takes 3 of the 12 to go with him into the garden to pray. He takes Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John. Now, I want you to think about this. So Jesus loved all 12 of the disciples. He loved all of them. But there were only 3 that he could allow access in a very personal and intimate and critical time in his life. It didn't discredit the love that he had for the other 9. He still loved him. They were still his disciples. But there were only 3 that he could take with him in a very personal and critical time. Those 9 disciples that were asked to stay there, the ones that had the limits, that's your middle circle. The 3 who went with Jesus, they will fall into your inner circle, along with Ruth. Those 9, your middle circle. You still love them. You still have relationship with them. You don't discredit anything, but they just couldn't go. They can't go in your inner circle. So let's discuss the last category, and that's the outer circle. Your outer circle are those individuals whom you are cordial with. When you see one another, you're always pleasant towards each other. You have a few laughs here and there, but there's no strong personal interest as with your inner and your middle circle. Your outer circle does not know any intimate or personal details of your life. They validate your relationship or maybe what they've heard about you or with the limited interactions that they've had with you. The outer circle, those are your acquaintances. Remember, we talked about acquaintances before. Your outer circle are your acquaintances. And they're your acquaintances maybe forming into friendships. They're not, you're cordial, you're caring, you're kind. But when it comes to personal details of your life, you're not sharing that with your outer circle. So the example I like to give when it comes to the outer circle is when Jesus traveled from town to town in ministry. Jesus traveled from town to town, city to city. He traveled all over. And Jesus met so many people as he went around traveling from town to town. He showed love to every single person he met. He showed kindness, and he even healed people so that they would have a better life. Now, we know that Jesus loves us all so much that he sacrificed his own life so we would have eternal life. So it's never a question of how much Jesus loves you, because he showed you that on the cross. And even in relationships, it's not a question of how much you love, because all of us are instructed to love one another. But I want you to think about this. While Jesus did walk this earth, he understood his purpose and his assignment, and he knew that everyone could not go with him everywhere. He understood that. And one thing I want to, when it comes to when he traveled, when he interacted with people, he loved everyone. When he healed the blind man, he healed him, right? But he didn't start sharing intimate details that he would have shared with his disciples or with those three that were most close to him. He healed the man, he cared about him, and Jesus went on his way. Now, I want to give another example. As hospitable as Mary and Martha, when Jesus was traveling around and Mary and Martha opened up their home for Jesus to come in and rest, they were so hospitable. They wanted Jesus to come in and just take a break, sit down, rest yourself. So as hospitable as they were when they invited Jesus to their home, when he left, he didn't share personal experiences with them like he would have with his disciples. He didn't tell them, pack up your things and come on, let's go, come with me. He didn't do that. After the visit, he moved on. Jesus loved them no less. But those who were in his inner and middle circles were already chosen. Your outer circle, the Marys, the Marthas, the blind man, your acquaintances, people you meet, you love, you show kindness, but once that is over, you keep it moving. You're not inviting them into your personal space. So we have discussed the inner circle, the middle circle, and the outer circle. And I'm hoping from this chat, we were like 42 minutes in, I'm hoping that this helps you all to evaluate your relationships and your understanding that all relationships are not created equal. All friendships are not created equal. It's just we have to learn to evaluate and identify these relationships. We discussed the three circles, but there's one more thing I do want to discuss before we do get off today. And I want to talk about a group that's not a part of the circle, but it's what I call the red flag crew. You're like, Monika, what is the red flag crew? Well, this is the group that you start seeing adversarial traits from. This is what I would call, and when I say enemy, I don't want you to think I'm saying, oh, just they're bad. You have to automatically put up a guard and, be, mean, or that's not what I'm saying. But you have to identify, when I say adversarial or enemy, I mean someone that's against you. Someone who's not supporting, who's doing the complete opposite or maybe negatively impacting your life. That's part of the red flag crew. So this is the group you start seeing adversarial traits from the jump, or even along the process of getting to know them. You start seeing things, you're like, I don't know. The red flag crew always speaks negatively about your ideas. Every time you have something to say, they always have a comeback with something negative, or it's always the opposite of what you have to say. They always have their hand out to receive from you. It's always give, give, give. And, I need, and I'm not just saying when it comes to finances or things like that. It could even be just, you go out to eat somewhere. Well, I want to do this. It's always me, 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 me. Red flag crew. They never encourage, but they discourage. Easily offended and angered. Have you met a person And even in a friendship where you say something and they're quick to get angry. Or, well, I didn't do that. Or quick to be offended by something. Well, what do you mean? Red flag crew. Red flag crew individuals never reciprocate or give back to you the same energy that you give to them. And it's a one-sided relationship. So when you see or when you start feeling like you're doing, and you never get back, that's a red flag. It's a red flag. They don't support you when you level up. When you're making moves, when you're doing, when you're bettering yourself and you're moving to the next level, they're not supporting you. Red flag crew. And you often find too, when it comes to people that belong in that red flag crew, that there's always some type of comparison. When you start seeing all of these traits, red flag the person. Red flag them. And I say red flag because when it came to war, a red flag, or when you see a red flag in general, that's used as a sign of warning, caution. If you start seeing traits that are you're starting to question if they're really for you, red flag them. So when you encounter people in that red flag crew, this is when you start talking to God. Well, not when you start. You should already be talking to God. But this is when you ask God and proceed. When you talk to God and you proceed with that weapon of goodbye. When you start seeing these red flag traits, talk to God about it. And go ahead and exercise. Use that weapon of goodbye. Because you do not want to bring any unnecessary things to your life. Especially when it comes to when you're seeing it, you don't want to invite someone access to your life that is not going to positively impact your life. So when you see these signs, this is not going to be good. This will be a negative impact on my life. So goodbye. And keep this in mind. Even relationships in general, when we talk about relationships, when you see there's something in a person that may not be right, I want you to always remember this. It's not the person themselves. It's what's in them. It's what's inside of them that makes them act the way they do. So, sometimes we see things and we're quick to lash out on the person, but it's not actually the individual themselves, but the spirit inside of them. So keep that in mind. And even that's why it's important, pray for that person. When you see somebody in the red flag crew, pray for that person. You don't have to just dismiss them and just be like, well, forget you. No. Dismiss them, spirit of goodbye, that weapon of goodbye, and you pray for them. And then you keep it moving. Remember this, the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But Jesus came to bring life, and not just life, but abundant life. So when you identify a person as being a part of the red flag crew, it is important to understand that the enemy can use them to kill your joy, to steal your peace, and destroy your heart. That's what the enemy is after. He doesn't want your heart whole. He wants you broken. When you're operating from a place of pain, a place of hurt, and a place of brokenness, it's hard to see yourself in a better situation. And that's what the devil wants. He wants you in that place because he wants you feeling like, okay, there's nothing else you can do. This is your life. This is what you have to settle for. But God has a purpose for your life. And even in the middle, you could be right in the middle of experiencing hurt, pain, brokenness, disappointment. Right where you are. God has a purpose even for that. You don't have to settle for that place. You have a way out. And his name is Jesus. the one who came to give you life, abundant life. You don't have to settle if you found yourself in that, being, and I'm not going to say victim, because I know that is a word, but being in a position where you've allowed yourself to interact with someone in the red flag crew. If you've experienced that and you've experienced the disappointment from that, your life doesn't have to end there. It does not end there. But this is why it is so critical that you include God in the process of identifying the purpose of your relationships and if they even belong in your life. Remember, when we include God, He sees the person's heart. He sees those things we can't see. So when we include Him in that process, He will reveal things to us. Or you may look up one day and you're wondering, well, why is this person gone? Because God has removed them from your life because He saw things you didn't see. So when we mismanage relationships by placing people into roles they were never meant to walk into, we set ourselves up for disappointment. We set ourselves up for disappointment. And a lot of times, I will tell you from personal experience, I'm very optimistic. I always like to think the best of a person. That's just the way I'm wired. It's always give a person a chance. In my book, everyone starts with 100. Everyone starts with 100 until I start seeing, and this is part of evaluating, until I start seeing things, that's when those numbers decrease. But I always give everyone a fair chance. Now, I still consult God when it comes to relationships and ask Him, okay, where does this person go? Should I even be in a relationship with this person? Should I be interacting with this person? But everyone starts at the same level. And I do that because it goes back to setting those expectations. When you set everyone at the same level, that acquaintance, you set everyone at the same level and you allow God to show you in the process and to guide you in the process. But as He's guiding you, He's showing you things about that person and you're seeing things so you can know what expectations to set for that relationship. So that goes back to, if you see that they're a middle person, if they're a middle circle relationship, you shouldn't be giving them expectations of a person in your inner circle. You shouldn't. Because that creates the disappointment. That creates the hurt. That creates the pain. We can expect a person to operate on our inner circle level when they really only have the capacity to operate in inner circle. So that's saying, if the person is in your inner circle, those are the expectations you have of them. If they're in your outer circle, those are the expectations you have. If they're in your middle circle, those are the expectations you have. Nothing more, nothing less. You've already set the limits. You set those boundaries. Goes back to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He only took 3 with Him to pray. He knew the limits. He knew the only 3 He could take with Him. So as we continue in life, when it comes to relationships, guard your heart. Remember, guarding is not putting up a steel wall. Guarding is creating a fence so that you can determine who you want to open that gate for and let in, and who you want to keep that gate closed and don't even give access to. Also remember the story about someone knocking at your door. That's guarding your heart. They're knocking at your door. You're looking, peeping out the window, before you even say anything. You're evaluating, looking to see, okay, what does this look like there about before I even say anything? Then what do? We go to the door. If we feel comfortable of going to that next level, then we go to the door. Who is it? Once they explain themselves, what do we ask? What do you want? This is what you're doing. This is part of guarding your heart. If you decide that when you meet a person, you're evaluating, you're observing, then you decide, okay, well, let me go and then, ask, okay, let me find out, who are you really? If you want to go to level 2, level 1, evaluating, looking to see, okay, I'm observing you right now. You don't know I'm observing, but I'm observing. Level 2, who are you? Let me learn you. Let me start to know more about you. Then level 3, what do you want? That goes back with purpose. What do you want? Now, I'm not saying you have to come out, and you may want to. It just depends on where you are with your relationship. You may want to ask, well, what do you want? What's the purpose for this relationship? It's fine to say that. Or you can be discreet about it and just ask questions until you kind of figure out, okay, this is the purpose. You're here for X, Y, Z. And once you get to that level, if you decide you want to open the door and give them access, or if you decide, okay, this is going to positively impact my life, this relationship is helpful, go ahead and open the door. If God says go ahead and do this, go ahead and open the door. Go ahead and let that latch up and open that gate and let him in. But you let him in with those boundaries of the circles. Inner, middle, or outer. Inner, middle, or outer. And everyone should start with the outer and work their way in. Take the time to get to know a person. Take the time. Remember from the article I read with the doctors, it takes at least 3 months to form a friendship. At least. 3 months is the minimum. And it says to form a friendship. Forming means you're still creating that thing. It doesn't mean it's in full bloom. At least 3 months to form a friendship. 2 years before you clearly know the person. Take your time. Because if they're meant to be in your life, they're not going anywhere. Or even if you take a break or you don't see them for a while, if they're meant to be in your life, they will be in your life. And they will see the value in you using discernment in relationships. Most important, don't forget to include God in your selection process. That is so critical because he sees all. He sees things we don't see. So include him in the process of identifying your relationships. And when you think about it, when it came to the 12 disciples, Jesus didn't just randomly pick his 12. He prayed a whole night. He prayed to God for instructions of who his 12 would be. Now, if Jesus prayed about his 12, don't you think we need to pray about who's in our circle of relationships? And be quick to use your weapon of goodbye when identifying somebody in that red flag crew. Be quick to use it. It's not saying you're mean, you're guarding your heart. That's what the Bible tells you to do. Guard your heart. So use that weapon of goodbye and don't feel bad about it. Because the thing is, you're protecting your heart because you don't want to bring someone in to your relationship, to your circle. You don't want to give a person access who will kill your joy, steal your peace, and destroy your heart. That's not what you want because that's not God's plan for you. So to avoid all of that, when we identify those red flags, if we see a person as a part of the red flag crew, goodbye and keep it moving. If you have found yourself in a place where you've experienced hurt, pain, or brokenness, or if you know of someone who has experienced the same and maybe they just can't get out of that season. All of us have been through disappointments in life. And sometimes it is hard to get out of that funk. And sometimes you're there for so long, it kind of becomes like normal to you. And there are times when people outside looking in can see that, you're still holding on to something. You're still hurt. You're still in that place of disappointment, but you got to let it go. If you found yourself in that situation, or you have someone that you know that's in that season, I ask you, please get a copy of my book. It's called The Capacity to Love, Freedom to Love After Seasons of Hurt, From Ashes to Beauty. And this book shares my personal, it shares some personal experiences that I went through over decades of disappointment, of hurt, of pain. And some of the situations, had I been knowledgeable of what I'm sharing with you today, I could have avoided some of those situations. Now, some I did not have control of, but there were some that I could have avoided if I had only known what I'm sharing with you now. But I'm glad that I did go through that, because I'm able to share with you so that you can have a better understanding and have wisdom on how to manage your relationships, how to identify relationships so that you don't bring any unnecessary disappointments and hurts into your life that you don't even have to go through. So I ask you, if you know of someone, or if maybe you want to read it, and maybe you've gone through things in the past and you're like, well, I'm fine, but this book even helps you to identify there may be things that you don't even realize that are still inside your heart that that are deterring, or that are preventing you from loving at your fullest capacity. So I'm going to put a link to Amazon in the description if you want to purchase the book. I'm going to do that now. It's in an ebook, so it makes it easier just to click on the link and download it. We will have hard copy books coming in the near future. But as of now, we have ebooks, because a lot of people these days, they're on the go, they're ripping and running. And, it's so easy just to click and download a book onto your iPad, your whatever, your laptop, whatever you have. So I'm going to put a description to the book. I'm going to put a link in the description to access and to purchase the book, along with all of the scriptures that I discussed in today's chat, because it helps sometimes to go back and read them for yourself, because you may even see something that God didn't show me. When we read, when you read things, God shows different people different things. So you may even go back to these scriptures and say, wow, I really didn't even see that either, So I'm going to put all of that in the description field for you to access. But, I pray that this has provided insight on relationships, and understanding that all relationships are not created equal. And when it comes to relationships, it is critical that you guard your heart, and you guard your heart by including God in that process and identifying your relationships, evaluating these people. Don't just let anyone in and give them access, and they've not proven to you that they can have access to your life. You're special. God loves you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. So you can't just allow any old relationship to come into your life and cause turmoil and disappointment and, and distraction. You're better than that. So include God in the process, along with identifying these relationships. And until next chat, I love you all. God loves you all, and be blessed. Bye, fam.